e5 from the World Chess Championship. e4, Magnus Carlsen playing white. Sergey replies to e5, knight f3, and instead of the usual, after knight c6, instead of the usual Roy de Paz, we actually get the Spanish game. Instead of the Spanish game with the Roy de Paz, named after a Spanish priest, Roy de Paz, we get actually the Italian game at the moment. This is identified as the Italian game. Now, when black plays bishop c5, this then becomes the Gioco piano, which is the Italian for quiet game. But often it's not very quiet. That's the funny little joke about this. Gioco piano can be very aggressive. White castles. We have knight f6, d3, castles, a4, slightly on the rare side, more frequently played. There's other moves which are more frequently played, like c3. If we just roll back this move here, c3, as you might expect, knight bd2, bishop dropping back even, rook e1 or bishop g5. All of these are actually more tried and tested in practice than a4. Nevertheless, after d6, c3, it's kind of transposing back into more normal lines. a6, b4, gaining a bit of space potentially at the right time. With b5 might be on the cards at the right time. We have rook e1. Knight goes to e7. It wants to go to g6 to lie on that f4 square. Knight bd2, knight g6. That's pretty common idea. d4, c6. This means sometimes actually the bishop can sometimes maybe consider this diagonal later. We have h3. Now e takes d4, and the neat little trick here, knight takes e4. Yeah, it relies on this placement of knight bishop here for this pawn fork. Now, actually, knight takes e4. It's a bit on the passive side, arguably. It wasn't played knight takes e4, allowing this, because this little trick to get the piece back results in, pardon me, not there, to protect the pawn, to protect the knight. This position, black's sort of comfortable here because of that blockade on d5. You can't say that white has a gigantic advantage here. It looks to be under lock and key, the isolated queen's pawn. So instead, more ambitious, bishop takes f7, which slightly weakens black's king side, but it does give black potential pressure on the f file. We have rook takes, knight takes, and now we have d5. So this point f2, this diagonalist coordination, it's immediately kind of snuffed out any idea of that with knight c5, knight blocking that bishop. h6 to prevent knight g5, which could be a nuisance if h6 isn't played. Yeah, I mean there's a downside, but because white hasn't got the light squares here are not so critical. It can be afforded to play this. Rook a3 helps defend the king side and maybe even double rooks. So a pretty elegant move all in all. Rook a3 from the side. Bishop f5 looks pretty logical. Knight e5. Now we have some simplification, and now queen h4. It looks as though this parries e6 because of f2, the issue with f2 mentioned before. There are two avenues here, just to mention this. If white plays e6, bishop takes, either knight or rook rather, fell. This one we have bishop takes and we pick up the rook, and this one we have queen takes, queen f1 check, forcing queen takes. We have this position where rook takes c1, black's winning here. It's pretty good for black, that position. Yeah, 2 pawns up. It's to be avoided. So basically, after queen h4, yeah, it looks pretty dangerous. But we have this defensive move, rook f3, which is solid and simple. And still now this e6 lurks here. Bishop takes, so that gets rid of some of the protection for the e6 pawn and fixes white's pawns. These two on dark squares at the moment. We have a scenario here with a light square blockade. Now the scene is set, a light square blockade. Rook f4 hitting the queen, queen goes back, hitting c5, that's protected, and we have a dark square blockade against black's corresponding light square blockade. Rook ef8, and now the rook retreats to a more stable position against any naughty tactics perhaps in the future. We have bishop e4 hitting the rook, an exchange of rooks. And now this might be mildly annoying, not life-threatening, but f3 kicks the bishop. Now we have king h2. and this light square blockade. And yes, you might think opposite colour bishops. And we have both sides seemingly blockading each other quite comfortably. Queen invasion, the queen's evicted, goes back. A5, the lockdown on B7. So all of these 3 pawns on dark squares. Dark square bishop. All of these pawns on light squares. Light square bishop. King F8. The king actually cheekily goes over here for a walk, because black has got an underlying minority attack where a minority of pawns attack the majority to try and create structural issues. So we have G5. Yeah, it's kind of aggressive with the king moving as the prelude to this. So black is playing aggressively, getting his king a bit safer before this happens. So king switching to the queen side rather cheekily. So this minority attack is in place. White blockades here firmly the D5 pawn. Queen G6, as though H5 and G4 are coming. We have G4 to be able to potentially, if white wanted to play F4, it suffers from G4. So G4 signifies in effect that white might be interested in F4. We have H5, which changes the picture here for any F4 for the moment. Queen D2 hitting G5, that's a downside picked on immediately. The G5 pawn. Rook G7 defending G5, and now I know this looks weird. Both sides look to be playing cheeky king moves in this game, but it's safe enough here, it seems. Rook G8, King G2. Now we have takes. And actually, you know, one of the things that white did in attacking G5 was not totally blockade the D pawn. And we have this D4 pawn sack, which activates the bishop. Great pawn sack, it seems, from a practical point of view. Fantastic position for the bishop. Fantastic central position. But white plays now an immediate counter sack, but in the form of E6, immediately counter sacking the pawn to keep control of H8, and also opens up this diagonal. Before we go into that, there's this moment here where it's interesting that there's this forcing move. There's a few moves to consider. Rook H8, whilst that queen's not on here, you might think this is really dangerous, surely. But let's imagine Queen E4, Queen H6. So threatening Queen H3 and like a mate in 2, right? But we have King F1, check, and this position is quite interesting to check out. So this is a really interesting possibility. Now, if there's a couple of free ideas, Rook D8, threatening Queen D1. It seems Rook F1, and this is defensive enough for white. And also, if we consider in this position Bishop D5, that's interesting, but maybe check, and just Queen going back to stop Bishop C4 check. And white again seems, Bishop D4 hitting the Queen, seems as though this is a very interesting exotic variation, where even if black wins, even if black is 2 pawns up, white's got this bind on the dark square still, which is dangerous, which would actually force a pawn back because we're threatening mate here. Very interesting scenario. But if black's forced to get this just 2 pawns up, and then it's like 1 pawn up because of the 7th rank, then this is enough to be stable. In fact, yeah, the opposite colour bishop endings are very interesting. So this all stems, yeah, this active stuff stems from this idea of playing into this line here. There's also Queen A1 to consider. So we've looked at Rook D8, Bishop D5, but Queen A1. So this is really, you know, black's chance to do something quite attacking. But here, you know, Bishop D2 defends E1 critically, and it doesn't matter about the check because King E3 and then what? The white king seems safe enough. So there's some interesting possibilities buried in this game actually at this point, where just after this pawn sack basically that Sergey played, you know, he immediately played Bishop D5, which looks like natural, right? But yeah, Rook H8 is the possibilities we've just examined. So that's kind of interesting here. This is interesting how we can get to this scenario. But anyway, Bishop D5 was played. We have E6. This immediate counter sack stops any big dangers like rook h8 and queen h6, this battery down the h file. That's taken king g3. It provides rook h2 to evict the queen in the case of queen h6. If, for example, it's easy for white to go wrong actually. Rook e2, well, that's a nasty pin here with rook e8, and this position is really dangerous for white. So basically, yeah, king g3, it's pretty safe actually for white, it seems here, on careful analysis. Rook h2, queen f7, threatening queen takes f3. Yeah, there's one or two threats, but easily parried, it seems. Like this. I know the king looks awkward, it looks a little bit more maybe exposed than black king, but it seems just about safe enough. Rook h5, we have rook f8, and now a clever little move to defend against this. Not having to, well, if the queen moves, there's basically end of game. If the queen moves here, rook f3 winning e3, right? But there's a clever move. Can you guess if I give you 5 seconds starting from now? Okay, Magnus plays rook h7, and then we're in safe territory again with this move. This is not queen d8 is not really going to help black ultimately. We have just the queens coming off, and here agreed drawn. The thing is with this ending, right? You might think can white march this pawn? I'll just add a kibitzer just dynamically, just for a moment. Just quickly check out this ending scenario. If we go with this pawn and this king, right? I'm not sure it matters, you know, if we get a position like this. Pardon me, that'll be losing because the king f7. It's critical to play like this to stop king f7. Then we can get a blockade here, and yeah, this is going to be okay. And you know, black has to be careful, but it is a blockade scenario. There's one example, blockading scenario basically. One example, g5. So we saw an example with bishop d3. If we have bishop d3 again, other possibilities here to try and herd the pawn. If we have this position, sorry, it's pinned there. As soon as g7 happens, king f7. Yeah, we can blockade this pawn quite safely as an example scenario. So anyway, yeah, so we had a draw there basically if we just undo those moves that I've appended and go back again. Well, anyway, yeah, basically after this here is kind of agreed drawn here anyway. So maybe not the most exciting game ever in the world, but I wanted to quickly show you it anyway. Some interesting points there, you know, the pawn sack to liberate the bishop, but the immediate counter pawn sack kind of equalized again things to make sure black wasn't getting in a major attacking initiative with the opposite colored bishops, which can sometimes happen in those scenarios. Okay, comments, questions, likes, appreciated. Thanks very much.